Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Siskind. This is my book called Playing Solo Jazz Piano by Me Today. I want to tell you today about one of my favorite exercises, which I call the continuous scale exercise. And I'm going to show you on giant steps. The reason I'm using giant steps is because this is such a great exercise for practicing pieces where kind of the key centers are changing really quickly, and you're going to have to adjust your scale. Now, many of you might know that John Coltrane famously kind of practiced this 1-2-3-5 strategy on giant steps, playing the root, second, third, and fifth of each note of the scale. And that's great. If it's good enough for John Coltrane, it's absolutely 100% good enough for me. I recommend that as a really good place to start. But you'll notice that, it requires you to reset each and every chord that you come to. So after you've practiced that 1-2-3-5 exercise, I kind of recommend this next exercise as a way to play across the changes a little bit more. And let me demonstrate what you mean. I'll solo a little bit on giant steps. Here, I'll let you see the changes while I'm doing that. This is only the first few bars, but hopefully it helps a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Etc. All right, so let me show you how this continuous scale exercise works. So the ground rules are that we're going to essentially play one scale going up for 2 measures and then one scale going down for 2 measures. And we're just simply going to adjust the accidentals to go with the chords. So I'll show you what that means. I know that that's maybe a confusing explanation. So starting here, we're going to, of course, use the B major scale when we have a B major chord. And we'll just start from B natural. I'm going to show you some ways later that we could start from some different places. All right, so we got 4 notes. It's going to be 8th notes in the B major scale. And then we come to D. For D7, we'll use D mixolydian. Down the road, if you want to use fancier scales, if you want to, use some whole tone, octatonic, you name it, you certainly can. But for now, we're going to be nice and standard, not trying to show off. So now here's the important thing. The B major scale left off on E, and we're going upward. So we're going to start on an F. But of course, because it's D mixolydian, we need an F sharp, right? D mixolydian is the same as G major. So F is actually the only sharp. So now we come to G major, and we're going to continue on upwards, right? So we just had a B, so we're going to start this scale with a C. So C, D, E, and F sharp. Now, some of you who are good at theory or very perceptive might notice that we're starting on the 11th, which is usually not something we want to do for major or dominant 7th chords. For now, I'm going to recommend you just kind of really follow closely the rules of the scale, and then I'm going to talk later about a variation where we try to describe the chords a little better, okay? Then we come to B flat 7, so we'll use B flat mixolydian. Calling it B flat mixo to short. We'll start with a G since we left off on an F. We got G, A flat, B flat, and C. So now we've had 2 measures of ascending, and I told you that's as far as we're going to ascend. So we'll go to our highest note for the E flat major. It's going to be a D natural, and then we're going to descend. Okay. Since we have a full measure of E flat major, we're going to have 8 eighth notes from the E flat major scale. I hope that watching me write out notes is your idea of a good time. I always try to write faster, and then I'm worried I get too sloppy. So I don't know what to do. All right, we're leaving off on a D, and we're getting to A minor. We'll use A Dorian for A minor. And we got to start on a C, because we left off on a D. Gonna keep going down. We'll use D Mixolydian. These are, two modes from the same parent scale, right? They're both in the key of G major, so it shouldn't be too shocking. And now we've gone down for 2 measures, right? The E flat major is the first measure, and then this A minor to D7 is the second measure. So now it's time to go back up, starting on a B, which, not a coincidence, that's where we started originally. B, C, D, E, because of course we're using the G major scale. And we got B flat Mixolydian again. So we'll start on an F. And we'll start on a C for the E flat major. So we'll use the E flat major scale, of course. So we're forming this long continuous scale so that we can practice shifting modes kind of no matter where in the scale we are. So we don't always have to start from the root. We use F sharp Mixolydian. And now it's kind of actually an interesting moment. So I could choose here. I left off on an F, so I could go to an F sharp, which isn't technically a different pitch, but I think it's going to sound better than going up to what would be a G sharp. So I'm going to F sharp because it's still ascending, right? It's not the same as the F natural that came before. So now I've ascended for 2 measures, so we'll just start descending on the B major scale. Okay. So here's how this ends up sounding. One more time, maybe a little slower. So B major, D7, G major, B flat 7, E flat major, A minor, D7, G major, B flat 7, E flat major, F sharp 7, B major. So why work this way? Why practice like this? Here, I'll make myself a little bigger so I'm not just a tiny thumbnail talking to you. Why practice like this? So first of all, you don't want to have to restart every time you get to a new chord or a new mode or a new key center. You want to be able to play something that kind of crosses between different key centers, making a longer line. This is also great fingering practice. You might have the question of what fingering should I use, and I'll tell you, I don't really know, but you got to figure it out. You got to be good at figuring out fingering as a jazz pianist, right? That's just part of the gig. Now, with just this simple exercise, we could actually do it 7 ways on giant steps. So we started, remember, with the root of the B major 7. We could also start with the second note of the B major 7, right? So we're going to get a whole different set of notes if we start on a C sharp instead of B. Could start with D sharp. Right, and then we could start with E. So now we're getting to know these scales really well, and we're going to be able to kind of pick up wherever one leaves off. We also don't have to, I kind of arbitrarily set 2 measures as my, turnaround point. But you could set whatever turnaround point you want. It could be just 1 measure. You could get used to turning around quicker. Or it could be longer. It could be 3 measures, although you're going to get really to the top of the piano. And you're going to have to use a lot of 8VA markings. Right. So those would be my first next steps. So start at different places. Change the turnaround point And then number 3, your third variation would be to practice with scale patterns. So instead of just playing the scale up and down, could you do this with, let's say, triads? Right? Could you do it with thirds? There's a million scale patterns. I'm fond of quoting Rufus Reed, who told me that practicing scales was like cooking chicken. As long as you do a good job, as long as you cook it all the way through, every single way that you could possibly practice these scales is going to pay off. And then I try a variation, excuse me, where you aim for chord tones. So we talked about that measure 2 where we had the 11th landing on the downbeat. And, you don't really want to do that when you're improvising. You want to aim, instead of the 11th, maybe for the 3rd. And probably what you'll do in order to make that happen is to use passing tones. So let me show you how that would work. I'm going to have to erase a little bit. So I guess I don't have to erase the scale names. Those aren't going to change. Okay, so looking at these first couple of measures, the first measure, obviously, we started with a root, so that's really good. The second measure, we started with the 3rd, so that's a great place to be. But that brings us, remember, if we keep on going, we'll end up on the 11th for the G major, which is not a good place to be, right? That's going to really always conflict with the 3rd of the chord. So what can we do instead? We can add a passing tone here. We can go A to A sharp to B. And then let's see what happens. So if we go up like that, we get to the 5th of the B flat 7. And now if we keep going up, we end up on the 6th or the 13th of the E flat major, which is not really a bad note, but let's just say, just for argument's sake, that maybe we want to have a little bit of a stronger resolution and aim for the 5th. So again, we can add a little passing tone here. So that we kind of create half steps into that B flat instead of aiming for the 6th of the chord. So now it sounds like this from the very beginning. Okay, so you can make modifications like that to the scale exercise so it's a little bit less literal, but maybe a little bit more effective. And then the 5th thing is maybe not a variation of this anymore, but it's kind of the next step, which is that I would practice some shapes that go over these chords. My favorite place to get shapes is from bebop heads or from bebop solos. So let's take, how about, I love this phrase, Oscar Peterson on C Jam Blues, he starts a solo. So the reason that I want to practice this is that, again, I want to practice changing not my phrase, not the shape of my phrase, but I want to practice changing the modes as I go through the solo. So if I take this same shape and I'll start bo bo doo bo. So remember it's bo bo bo. So I'm going to go up just in that same way. Bo bo doo. But now I need to change modes as I get to the D7. And you might find that you even need to adjust the intervals a little bit. Because, if you are, for example, making these half steps between the 2nd and the 4th, it doesn't really define the D7 chord as well as going between the 3rd and the 5th. So let's see, the original was. So I'm going to change the mode of this lick for the G major, and then I'll end on an F natural instead of an F sharp when I get to the B flat 7. So here's what this sounds like now. It actually works pretty well. Remember, the original was... Okay. So when I say change the shape, what I mean is we're going to certainly keep track of where it ascends and descends. We're going to keep track of where it steps versus where it skips. And we're going to roughly try to keep the same interval. It might not be a major third each time. It might change from a major third to a minor third. And the intervals don't have to be precise, but we want to generally keep the same interval. Let's try the same lick for the E flat major to A minor to D7, 2 measures. I'm going to try not to start on the 5th this time, just to give a slightly different take. Let's see. So let's do it like this. Ba, ba, boo, 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 ba, dum. See, I'll zoom in so you can see slightly better. And now the tricky part comes. So remember, the original lick was... So it's still going up by a half step, but instead of being a triad in root position going down after that, right? The first one was... Now it's a triad in, what is that? First inversion. So now we have... It's a little awkward because, I mean, it's so awkward to go from E flat major to A minor. It's not like, Oscar Peterson was just playing over a C6, basically. Let's do this for one more key. I will start on the 5th this time because that's just really where it wants to start. And now we have to change modes as we get to the B flat 7. Cool. So now we've got... So from the top, I'll play all 3 versions of this phrase adjusted for the changes of giant steps. Yeah, so it's kind of a little wacky and wild. It doesn't necessarily sound like Oscar Peterson. So I want to show you this whole sheet. Oh, I erased all the variations. Well, here's what I've got for you. So remember, the first thing, I'll come back to this view for you. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to make these scales, these unidirectional scales that only turn around at certain given points. I recommend 2 measures as a good starting point. And you're going to change modes as the chords change, and they demand different modes. Then you can start practicing patterns within those scales instead of just going by step. Then try changing the turnaround point to get different results. Try starting at different parts of the scales so you get different kind of variations. And then you can practice trying to aim for chord tones as you get to each new chord. Lastly, try practicing with shapes that you get from bebop tunes or bebop solos, like the Oscar Peterson shape that I showed you. And all the while, you're adjusting it for the modes of a difficult tune like giant steps. Just a reminder, you can get my book at my website, jeremysiskind.com. I will send you a signed copy immediately. And please like and subscribe. I'll see you later.